So people that aren't familiar with you and your story, can you kind of give a little bit of just tell me who you are and what
Yeah.
you do, and we'll take it from there.
Ben Samama. I'm from The Hague, which is a town outside of Amsterdam. I grew up in a musical family. My parents were classical musicians, are still classical musicians, and I was surrounded by an orchestra, choirs. My brothers are both musicians. It ran in the family to a point where I don't think I have any other skills, to be honest. And what it means is that I just don't have a plan B. I
Mm.
never had quote unquote a real job. I never had a studio or like a desk job. I never done anything besides practice music, and then try to make a living from it. I went to college in Holland called the Royal Conservatory, which is for jazz voice, very hoity-toity, like all that super like old-timey stuff. Throughout that time, I realized, oh no, actually, I love pop music.
Mm.
But what I thought was pop music, because that's the only pop music that they allowed in that school, was like Al Green and Jackson 5 and Curtis Mayfield. And then I was offered a scholarship to go to the US. And that's how I ended up in Berkeley in Boston,
Oh
and
wow.
that basically opened up the music industry in the US to me, which I didn't really know much about. I just knew that I wanted to do pop music, and I loved soul music in the 60s inspired. And I was like, well, let's go to where that is made originally. Let's go to the birthplace of that place. So I just went to the US and I met so many friends, and everybody was talking about the life of a songwriter as opposed to the life of a performer.
Mm.
Because in Holland, you don't, well, at least back then, you weren't really able to just be a writer. It wasn't really a thing. You perform it, you write for yourself. That's the life. Or at least that's what I thought was the life. And I don't necessarily love performing so much. So when they said, well, you know, you could just be a writer, there's a career for that, I was like, oh my God, I found my place.
Mm.
And then I just never left. I kind of stayed. My friends moved to New York. I followed them. My friends moved to LA. I followed them. In the meantime, dealing with immigration, originally trying to get the F1 visa, then trying to get the O1 visa, then living on an O1 for 10 years. So that means three extensions. Each of them was 3 years, one was 1 year. I think that's what it was. And then meeting my wife, we've been together 11 years, and then we got married 3 years ago. And
Wow.
that's kind of now
Congratulations.
why I have the green card. Yeah, thank you so much. And now I'm on the green card through that process. But I would have gotten it anyway, because you can start applying for that if you have X amount of things done, or if you're here for an X amount of time.
Mm.
So it would have been one or the other. And that's kind of how it happened. I fell in love with the place and I never left,
Mm.
even though I didn't set out to become like a songwriter in the pop industry. I just kind of went with it, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. So I'd love to hear more about that. First of all, I want to comment on the fact that like
Yeah.
you must be quite the remarkable musician to go to. I mean, like Berkeley's quite the school, and you must come from quite the musical family to go to a conservatory in Holland and then to come to
Yeah.
Berkeley on a scholarship to come to Berkeley. Like that's the
Yeah,
top
I
of
was
the cream of the
lucky.
crop.
I mean, if you talk about the amount of luck it took me to get there, the amount of luck it took me to get there was astounding in a way that, one, yes, I was raised in a musical family. One, that's lucky part number one. Lucky part number two, I got this scholarship from, not even from Berkeley. I mean, they gave me a little bit of money because I was a jazz vocal major and they loved that.
Hmm.
And back then in that school, like if you did anything related to jazz, they would just throw money at you. And I got some scholarship for that. But then mostly there was a scholarship out of Holland called the Huygens Fonds, I think is what it's called, that basically said, if you qualify, you'll get a full ride.
Hmm.
Boom, go away. We don't want you here. We want you to go to the US and do what you want to do. And I was the only one who applied because no one else knew about it. It was this brand new thing.
Wow.
And I was just lucky enough to have an advisor in my old college who said, did you know about this thing? I don't think anyone else does. If you apply, most likely you're going. So I applied and they gave me full scholarship.
Wow.
I didn't have to pay a single thing. Berkeley is expensive.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
is, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know anyone honestly that can pay that unless you have scholarship help.
Uh-huh.
Unless you come from far away and you have like, family money or something, but mostly I certainly didn't. So I got to Berkeley and basically, which is funny because I got in on a jazz scholarship and then didn't do jazz the entire time because I
Oh,
was like,
well.
I want to write songs and I
Uh-huh.
want to do pop music. And I met all my friends there and they're all like educating me basically on American pop, which I didn't know much about. I mean, you hear it in passing in the car and on the radio and MTV, but I wasn't like inundated with Britney Spears and hip hop or any of that stuff, I was inundated with Bill Evans, with Rachmaninoff, with Shostakovich, with
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with Jackson 5 and Curtis Mayfield and all the things that I thought was pop music. So it was a large transition for me to go into currently what is pop music and what I make now, which is like pop. And I
Bubblegum
love
pop.
making it. Yeah, bubblegum pop or anything, even, I do a lot of work in Korea,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that currently, you could definitely call that bubblegum pop, but it's also, I make a lot of funk records with artists there, and, I
Yeah.
kind of like go back into my roots, but generally like understanding the full landscape of like what pop means or what it can be.
Absolutely. Well, it just stands for popular music, right? Yep.
It stands for popular music, and it's whatever currently is poppin'. You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And also for me, the finding the love for music that I haven't heard before, or finding the love to make something that I necessarily wouldn't make myself, like, more heavier rock music or emo music that didn't grow up on. I talk to anyone here, they all grew up on Blink 182. It's in their bones.
Sure.
Most people in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
US, they know, you know what I mean? And they understand it and they live it. And I just grew up in this like very art bubble, have you heard the latest Kurt Elling record? Which is again a name that no one knows. It's like a jazz singer. So for me, I had to like inundate myself and re-educate myself a little bit on like what American culture is, and not just what American culture was in the 60s and the 70s.